Today, I'm going to explain to you the 6 skills that every single English learner needs to pay attention to if you want to be able to use the English language on a daily basis. And the 6th skill that I'm going to explain to you in this video, I think is by far the most important, in my humble opinion. So make sure you stick around to the end of the video to see what that skill is. Let's get right into it. The first skill is reading. You need to be an efficient reader if you want to learn and use the English language on a daily basis. Reading is something that is pretty much unavoidable, whether you live in a native English-speaking country or you live in a country that doesn't even speak English, especially in 2024, having the internet and social media so easily available to you. Not to mention that about 80% of all the media out there is actually in the English language and not other languages. So if you're trying to learn English and if you're immersing yourself using the internet, it is inevitable that you're going to come across situations where you're going to need to have good reading skills. This is extremely important because some of the most common consequences that come from people who cannot read well is that they completely misunderstand the context of what they're reading. This is because in the English language, we have things called homonyms and homophones. These are words that can either be pronounced exactly the same or spelt exactly the same, but have completely different meanings. For example, to, and to, there and there, content and content. These all are spelt the same or pronounced the same, but have completely different meanings. Similar to the importance of reading is the art of listening. It is almost equally as important that you know how to listen, because even if you are not in an English-speaking environment, wherever you are in the world, if you use the internet, you're inevitably going to come across some media that is spoken in the English language. Listening and reading, more so than any of the other skills, are things that you're pretty much not going to be able to avoid if you're trying to learn English. The best way to improve both of these skills at the same time is simply by listening to English media with English subtitles. If you're going to go this route and use this method, I highly recommend that you listen to realistic conversations in the English language. This can be found on interviews on YouTube, podcasts, and things among the sorts. However, if you listen to dramatic TV shows or dramatic movies, unfortunately, in a lot of them, they are going to be using words, expressions, and tonalities that you may never ever encounter in the real world. There are 2 other skills that will be used a lot less than reading and listening on a daily basis. However, they are still pretty important if you want to communicate in the English language. Let's start with writing. With writing, this can come in a lot of different forms. This could be typing an email, this could be texting a text message, or this could be literally physically writing a note. Typing and texting is obviously a lot easier because there are grammatical tools such as spell check that can help you avoid making spelling mistakes when you're typing or when you're texting. This can be a little bit harder when you're physically writing. In my opinion, I don't believe that you need to be a world-class writer or a famous poet like Shakespeare when you're learning English. I honestly think if you can just clearly communicate what you are trying to convey in the English language, and it can easily be understood or deciphered by native English speakers, then I think you're good to go. You could really navigate your way through most situations that you'll come across in the day-to-day world in an English-speaking environment. Even if you're not in an English-speaking environment, typing, texting, and writing is still crucial if you want to communicate with people through the internet. So essentially, if you're an internet user who searches and does things in English on the internet, then writing really is still an everyday tool that you're going to need in your arsenal of English skills. You can be more selective with when you choose to write as opposed to reading and listening, which are inevitable, but it is still very important, just like speaking. Speaking is similar to writing in the sense that it can be used as a form of communication in many different ways in the year 2024. Through the internet, through real life, tourists who come to your country in an English-speaking environment, and many more other situations. If you don't live in an English-speaking environment, you can get away with not being as articulate when you speak in English. However, if you are in a native English-speaking environment, it is far more important that you are really well spoken and very clear when you speak in the English language. Unlike sending a text message to somebody, there's there's a whole nother element when it comes to speaking, which is also your tonality. In some cultures or some other languages, the tonality is totally different and it can sound awkward or rude when you speak with that tonality in the English language. It's very important to pay attention to these small nuances. And with writing and speaking, improving them is a lot more simple than reading and listening, simply because it just comes down to repetition, just practicing what you have observed through reading and listening. Whereas with reading and listening, you have to actually make a good decision with what you choose to read and what you choose to listen to. But none of these 4 skills can even be practiced if you don't have something that is really important and foundational, which is grammar. Without grammar, there is no reading comprehension, listening comprehension, writing, or speaking. Grammar is the glue that puts all 4 of those skills together, at least basic grammar. Similar to what I said about writing, you do not need to know extremely complex and advanced grammatical rules, unless you're trying to become a teacher or professor or pursue a career in something that has to do with linguistics. However, by and large, if you just understand the basic rules of the English language, or the basic grammatical rules specifically, it should be good enough to navigate your way through an English-speaking environment. Examples of these could include knowing how to communicate in English in the past tense, in the present tense, and then into the future tense. Again, when you're communicating, you do not need to use advanced grammatical devices. You can honestly just keep it really simple and clearly say what you're trying to say. And I can guarantee you that native English speakers will most likely understand what you're saying. Also, as a native English speaker, such as myself, we do not follow all of the grammatical rules of our English language or even understand the advanced grammatical rules of English. So if we don't really understand it as native speakers, then that is the reason why I'm telling you that you don't necessarily need to understand it as a non-native speaker. And this leads me to the last skill, which I think is by far the most important skill that any English learner can have, and that is vocabulary. I would argue that even before grammar, without understanding the most commonly used words, the most commonly used expressions, the most commonly used phrasal verbs in the English language, it's going to be nearly impossible to even attempt to learn English in the first place. Vocabulary, unfortunately, unlike the other skills, there never really is an amount of vocabulary that is just good enough. It's something that you're going to have to strive to improve throughout the entire span of your life, probably until the day that you die. Even as a native speaker, I still make an effort to improve my vocabulary every day, and every day I actually come across words that I do not even understand as a native speaker. So this is completely normal, so don't feel discouraged or don't feel like your level of English is inadequate because you don't understand what every single word means in the English language. And there you have it. Those are the 6 skills that every English learner needs to pay close attention to if you want to use English on a daily basis. If you want to test what your current level of English is, if you're curious, then I created an English proficiency quiz that can give you a general idea of where you are between A1, A2, B1, B2, or C1 and C2. If you would like to take that English proficiency test, it'll be 60 multiple choice questions. I will leave a link in the pinned comment below or somewhere in the description. That's all for today, and I'll see you in the next video.